Welcome to this episode of Next Slide Please, a podcast where we try our very best to help non-designers up their presentation game and help designers to hate PowerPoint slightly less.
Welcome to the latest episode of Next Slide Please. My name's Mark.
I'm Emma Pritchard.
I'm Andy Bundock.
I'm PK Stefan.
In this episode, we're going to be talking all about fonts. And I'm very excited because I flipping love fonts. We're going to talk about the history of fonts. We're going to talk about how to pick the right fonts, how to use them, what are the benefits, what are the limitations that are to using different fonts in different presentation programs. So PK, why do you think fonts are so important?
Well, fonts define the brand. They set the vibe. They're as important as the shapes that you choose, the colors that you pick, and the imagery that you use. Fonts are really important. And on the slide, you can also use them to create hierarchy and differentiate content.
Yeah, that's true. And then Emma, our resident psychologist, do you have a different take?
I love all of those things as well, but my love of fonts goes a bit beyond the design. So looking at like what the brain does when it looks at a slide or it's reading a slide, the font is really important because you're judging it before you've even read a word. It's kind of an instant thing that we do, and it colors everything that we kind of read afterwards. So we've all seen, slides with Comic Sans, but if that's on a serious financial deck, the visual stops backing up the words and your audience thinks something's a bit off.
Yeah, no, definitely. You've got to be really careful, right? It's not just about the design, but what's the thing you're putting out there into the world. How about you, Andy?
I love the different personalities and voices of font will bring. I put it in front of my kids all the time and go, say, what's this one saying? And if a playful font or a very grown up font. When I get to play with them, which is not very often, that's what side hustles are for. I have a lot of fun. But obviously in the corporate world, we might not have as much choice. So something needs to be on brand, and we've got a playground to play in, and you shall not leave the playground. But listen, those restraints are there for a reason. And I'll say it again, consistency builds trust, and you follow those rules, all good.
Okay, let's get into it. First up, not off something I'm often going to say, but let's get pedantic. Fonts aren't really fonts. They're typefaces.
Okay,
Yes.
Mark, we'll let you talk about this one. Tell us what you mean.
Well, so when someone is picking Helvetica over Times New Roman, they're actually picking a typeface. The font is then the weight of that typeface. So light, medium, semi-bold, whatever you've got, italic, they're all the actual fonts.
Got it. So someone points at your slide and says, "Oh, I like that font." They're actually referring to the typeface. Is that correct?
That is spot on. Yeah, but to be fair, that's really pedantic, and I think maybe just us four get excited about it because we're a bit saddos, and basically everybody calls them fonts now, right?
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, so come on then. Where did the word font come from? Who knows this one?
Okay, I know this one. I'm going to jump in. It comes from the word foundry because back in the day, type used to be cast or founded from molten metal. And they were basically a physical set of letters in metal, one size, one weight. And if you wanted to increase that a bigger size, that's a totally different font, different drawer, different lump of metal.
I love that you bring up the different drawer because that's another historical fact. The capitals were kept in the upper drawer, hence uppercase, and the smaller letters were kept in the lower drawer, so lowercase. Pretty interesting, huh?
Yeah, I love that.
Literally a conversation about furniture. So isn't it crazy names of stuff that we have every day that have been around for hundreds of years? Like, bit of trivia for you.
All right, now we're going to talk about choosing a font. And the first part of this is really easy because you might not even get a choice, Andy?
Yeah, that's right. I touched on this earlier. If you're working for a company with a distinct set of brand guidelines, for the most part, you're not going to get to choose that, are you? like it regardless of the software or whether there's a template or not, whatever bit of application you're in, chances are someone's predefined what you're going to use. And that comes back to the consistency thing we spoke about earlier. And it's like,
Yeah.
it won't be restricted just to just PowerPoint. Well, it's like you've got colors, fonts, image, tone of voice, all that kind of stuff. It all intertwines together, and fonts are just like one part of the jigsaw puzzle, aren't they?
Yeah, and in terms of sort of your slides, it does make it slightly easier because you've obviously got those restrictions, which means it's nice and consistent. But not all jobs are like that, or not all decks are like that. So if we're not on that type of job and we're not on that type of deck, how do we go about choosing a font? Or sorry, Mark, typeface.
So if I see a font I like somewhere, let's say like a poster or a website or something, is there like an equivalent of Shazam? Can I just kind of Shazam it?
I love that.
Shazam.
Yeah, me
Shazam.
too.
I mean,
You just say, you want to Shazam that font?
I want to Shazam that font. I want to know what it is straight away within so many seconds, or else I'm disappointed.
That would be
I have to
great.
be careful. Yeah, I have to be careful how I say this, but I think we've all used what the font before.
Yes.
That's a great place to upload a bit of
Yes.
a font to figure out exactly what it is. But it'll
Yeah.
often bring up fonts that are maybe expensive, like a
Mm.
particular foundry or something like that. So,
Yeah.
that is a gotcha when you're using what the font, but it'll give you
Yeah.
a good idea.
Is there a cheaper
font?
or like a free alternative then? What about if I don't want to use an expensive font?
I think we've all been to Google's fonts resource. That's a fantastic resource. There are so many great fonts there that are similar to something you might find at What the Font. So if what you find is rather expensive, then you can Google that font and figure out if there's something over at Google. That's where I'll typically go if I don't have the budget or the client doesn't have the budget for it.
Yeah, it's got me out of jail from a number of times. That has.
Yeah, I mean, you can download those for free. So
Yeah, and you can use them across not just your slides, you can use them across all different parts of your work or your business. They're totally free and usable.
Yeah. And there's some big names in there as well, isn't there? It's not just stuff that sort of Google's come up with. They've also licensed stuff from
Yeah.
other places. Yeah. Great tool I like to work with Google Fonts to help you find one is this thing called wordmark.it. Again, it goes into your Chrome. It's a little kind of plugin you can have there. And first, it'll tell you all the fonts that are on your machine already to save you buying anything. It'll just tell you the choice and how they look at different sizes. And then when you can flip it to have a look through all the Google fonts, you can fill your screen and it'll scroll through them. And yeah, I love it. It's sort of cheap and cheerful, but it's a nice little plugin if you're doing this quite a lot.
Great.
love it.
Okay, so in the previous section, we mentioned about downloading fonts. That's great. If you're going to, as we're going to go into this section, not all software works in the same way. So let's get started. We're going to go through each one of the main tools to make a presentation and tell you how they work with fonts. First up, PowerPoint.
Yes, PowerPoint still the GOAT. A bit like Lionel Messi, 39 years it's been around. And of all the software, it's probably the best, or at least has the most options when it comes to working with fonts. You can choose a standard font if you're sharing with unknowns or in your large organization. When I worked at Gartner and we were building global keynotes for around the world, we didn't know what machine it's going to be loaded on at a remote location. And so we would use Arial, even though Gartner had a branded font for the presentations. We would always use Arial, even in our big keynotes. So you can choose the standard just to be safe. And they're decent standards there.
Yeah, I love that. So from my sort of psychology point of view, there's something going on there with terms of like Gartner choosing an Arial font. It's the halo effect. So it's basically we all have cognitive biases. So we judge a font like we would a trait in somebody, and it's a sign of something bigger. So basically judging a book by its cover, except it's a whole presentation judged on its font. So if something's a bit mismatched, or if it just doesn't really work across different computers, like you're saying, PK, that's exactly what will cause problems when people are trying to take in the information or the message that you're giving them. And that's probably why nobody ever got fired for just picking Arial and making it work and be consistent.
Yeah, I mean, that's the worst thing. You do a lovely design, and then a font gets substituted on the other end. Someone's looking
Right.
on their mobile device or something else, and yeah, it throws everything else out. Yeah, the client calls you up and they're like, "Why does this look like that?" And I'm like, "I don't know. What are you doing?" I think there are stronger fonts now in Microsoft PowerPoint. We've got Aptos now. I don't know. We could get into a whole discussion, but I think that's better than Calibri, right?
Oh.
You can. Okay,
I get a bit
Don't
twitchy
even
about
get me
Calibri.
started.
I mean, PowerPoint works with any font. You can choose those standards, or you can go to the next level, which is choosing a cloud-based font, which will download onto the machine if it's not something that's a standard install. And then the third option, which raises a lot of eyebrows, is embedding, which is where you kind of pack up the font into PowerPoint, and pass it off to somebody else. As long as you got the licensing down, there's issues with file size, and you really need to do some testing with that. But there is more functionality if you know what you're doing, with the embedding. So standard, cloud, and embedding are the three options that we've got there.
Just to quickly jump
And
in
it
on that, PK, there's just a little visual tip. What you mentioned about the cloud fonts. If you go into PowerPoint and you go to your font drop down, if you see a little cloud icon, I think it's got a little cloud icon. It might have a little down arrow. If you see that next to a font, you can choose that, and then at the other end what's going to happen is when they open up your PowerPoint deck, and if you've chosen the font with a little cloud next to it, PowerPoint will go and get it from the PowerPoint servers and then pull it down and then sort of pre-install it so it's going to work. So it's just a little tip.
So I love that you're kind of focusing on cloud fonts, because that reminds me that raise your hands if you've been to Design to Present, I think is
Oh yeah,
Yes.
Julie Turberg's website. I mean, that Julie, that is the Bible. If you're going to go beyond standard and you want to figure out what fonts are going to load properly in there, what they're going to look like, etc., go to Design to Present. Julie Turberg is the goat when it comes to helping people with cloud-based fonts, and figuring out that
awesome.
part of it.
Yeah.
Really good.
I wish
Yeah.
that existed for every tool that we use because it's brilliant and it's free. Okay, what about Google Slides?
Okay, so now this makes everything a lot easier with fonts. Little disclaimer, it doesn't have the power of PowerPoint. Wait, maybe that's why they call PowerPoint. Anyway, but it's a really neat, tight little program. Loads of organizations use it. It's part of Google Workspace. And for fonts, it's so easy because they're all free and built in. Whatever machine you open up your presentation on, the fonts are already there. There's thousands of free Google fonts, like we mentioned earlier. And don't think they're like some random computer-looking Googlyfied fonts. They're like proper font libraries that they've bought and put into their free library. The one problem with it is you cannot install a custom font. So if you did our What the Font earlier, you went off and found a beautiful font, it's not going to be in Google Fonts, or there's a good chance it won't be. But what you can do, there's this resource called Typewolf. And any font you find, you can look it up in Typewolf, and it'll show you the closest Google font to it. And it's not going to be an exact match, and you are going to get upset about the curl of the A or the downstroke of the G, but it's going to be as close as flipping possible, and potentially you and your audience might not notice the difference. But yeah, so Google Slides, love it for that. Emma, is that the case with Canva? It's quite similar, right?
It's similar. So it matches Google Slides for that kind of real-time collaboration, and everybody has access to anything in your doc or anything slides that you're sending. But it has got a trick called Brand Kit. So you can upload your own font. So if you've got a custom font that you've found and you've bought and you've downloaded and you want to use as your brand font, you can upload them, and you can set your headings and your body defaults as well for the whole team to stay on brand automatically. It is a pro feature, so you will need to pay for that level of plan on Canva. And also, obviously, the things like licensing still applies. So if you've downloaded a font, make sure you've downloaded it from a reputable place and you've got the license for it, and the license covers the use that you're intending to use it for. But yeah, it's a great little thing on Canva that you can upload your own font.
Yeah, and if we're going to talk about AI-driven design apps, I mean, if you're using Claude in PowerPoint, then you're okay. The other apps, if we're talking about Gamma and Chronicle, Pitch, etc., there's a lot of great fonts. Some of them use Google Fonts. Some of them will allow you to upload a font. To be honest, I think still a lot of the AI-driven design apps, we're not so focused on coming up with something that's super branded. They're more the one and done kind of, I just need to do this deck for a meeting kind of stuff. So I don't think we should go into that in too great a detail.
Last up is Keynote, my personal little favorite, but I've left it to last because with fonts, it really doesn't play nice. For a start, you have to have a Mac, and all right, that's more common these days, but not many people use Keynote on their Mac because its files aren't compatible with anybody who doesn't have a Mac. So most people with Macs use PowerPoint or Google Slides or one of the others. It's almost as flexible as PowerPoint in that you can install any font. But even though we were a bit wary about it earlier, there's no way of embedding that font. So as soon as you sent that deck to somebody else, unless they happen to have that font, if they're in the same company as you, for example, they're not going to be able to see the file as you intended it. So you're already limiting your options to only sending it to people with a Mac and then to people with the right font installed. And so you're kind of really sort of narrowing in on a very particular audience. But if you're just presenting from your machine or from another Mac where you know that font's installed, then you're fine. And actually, Keynote renders fonts so much nicer than anything else. It's absolutely beautiful. I don't know why it's not more compatible.
I love Keynote because of the buttery smooth transitions. We used to use that at Gartner for the big keynotes. We would transfer decks from PowerPoint into Keynote because on the big wide LED screens, that stuff was gorgeous. But yeah, I think Mark brought up a good point too, and that's use case. I don't know if we're going to talk about that later on, but if you're just presenting something that you've built yourself, then you're safe. But the minute you start sharing and sending it to someone else, that's where you have to be careful about fonts, right?
Yeah, and then that's where you're getting into. I think the use case is the big key thing, isn't it? It's horses for courses. Like some people are going to be listening to this and going, "Well, Google's fine for me. Why do I care about all these other things?" Because they don't have the problems that sharing amongst a team, or they've got a small number of people and all the machines are the same, or what have you. But I run into problems with clients that are on multiple locations all the time when we're making sure that IT are involved with all the fonts and making sure that it's all consistent and things aren't breaking all the time.
So maybe this is one for those like looking to become a presentation designer rather than somebody just looking to make better presentations. This is kind of like you got to think about where your decks are going to end up, right? So, for example, I had that use case at Apple. I used to work at Apple, so everybody at Apple has an Apple. So, and everybody had the fonts, so it was never a problem, right? But yeah, if you're just building decks for yourself, like you say, Andy, like all the apps are going to work just fine for you.
Yeah. I think also that what we just picked up on here, and this is something that people don't often realize, clients and other designers alike, when you're working in presentation design, there's so much invisible stuff that's going on. And somebody like one of my clients put this, it was a great analogy. He referred to it as all of the invisible stuff that goes on, like all the pipe work, all the electricity stuff, and the cables and what have you that go on behind the plasterboard. You've got to get that stuff done first before you start making beautiful slides. and people don't often realise the tech back end, if you like, that a good presentation designer brings to the party in that consultation right at the beginning.
I'll admit that I embed, and you've got to really know, what you're doing. I mean, and I only do it in certain use cases, but that's because like I'm building a pitch for a startup and it's going to be on 3 people's machines and we've all downloaded the font. We're working within some parameters. Like you said, we've set up the pipes beforehand. You've got to know what you're doing because it gets complicated real fast.
So we've spoken about fonts and how they work in different applications. So let's look at PowerPoint. It's really important to set up your theme with the correct fonts and get them in your master pages, because then if you make a change, that will change on every single slide, and it's going to save you hours. All right, one change on one slide, every slide that you use that master, boom, done. So let's look about how to do that, because on a Mac and a PC, it's slightly different. PC wins on this one, I'm afraid. Sorry, Mac users. So here I am in PowerPoint, and I'm in the Design tab. If I click on the fonts drop down here, you will see I can customize fonts. If I click on that, I can change the heading and the body. And by adjusting the heading and the body copy here, it changes what happens here and what happens here. Okay, nice and simple. Let's look at on a Mac. Here I have the same standard master page. If I go to the fonts drop down, oh, there's no way of customizing the fonts. So what do? If you haven't already, please, please, please go to Bright Carbon and download Bright Slide. You will
Yes.
not look back, right? Guys, Bright Slide, yes.
Yes,
Yes.
100%.
1,000%.
Lifesaver.
Yep. I click on theme fonts. You can see I get a similar kind of pop-up that allows me to change the headings and the body copy. It's a little bit clunky. It's not out of the box PowerPoint, but it will get you out of jail. So always set up your theme fonts, to set up your master pages. Any changes you make centrally will proliferate through every single slide.
I love this, Andy. I think it's like table stakes in PowerPoint to set up your heading and the body copy. And you'd be surprised how many people don't do it. You'd be surprised how many decks I get, and they have not set
Yeah.
it, and they're
Oh,
changing
yeah.
the font on every new slide that they create. And it's like,
Yeah.
why?
Yeah.
Yeah, because if you're just adding a random text box, it's not going to pick up that font. It's going to be in the random default font. So yeah, that's where things go wrong.
My clients are getting better. One of the first things I used to do when I received a deck from them was like, I was just click on on a text box and just click on one of the drop downs at the top and see if the colors were set up as part of the theme, or if the fonts have been set up as heading, or whether it was just a straight out of the box Office theme.
Mm-hmm.
That's less and less now. That's better, but you're right, PK. The amount of people who don't use this to its full potential, and really, you're going to save yourself hours.
Do you remember that little paper clip that used to come up back in the day? Little tooltip.
Clippy. Yeah.
Yeah.
It looks like we're typing a letter.
Yeah, there you go.
It's the OG
So-
AI, right?
Exactly right. That's how
Yeah.
AI should be back in the day. So the tip for this for me is just set the typeface, don't set the font, because when you flip between machines, font names can get all a little bit crazy. If you're just setting the typeface, like in Andy's example, it would be Aptos for both. And then you can set display bit. Don't set the weight. Don't set bold. Don't set medium. Anything like that, because that could get a little bit unstuck. Just set the typeface.
Okay, so before we close, here's a little recap of some of the tools that we've mentioned in this episode.
First up, Google Fonts. I love Google Fonts. One of the things I didn't mention earlier was that if you're starting a whole new brand identity and you've got a free choice of fonts, I'll often choose a Google font because then I know it's going to work everywhere and it's free. So there's a lot of good stuff on there. You can find them by simply Googling for Google Fonts or visit fonts.google.com.
What the font, as we mentioned earlier, that's all part of My Fonts. So if you go to myfonts.com/pages/what the font, or just Google what the fonts, it will find it. That's a really, really helpful tool. I use it all the time. And then you're into your suggestions for fonts that you can purchase from My Fonts.
Nice. My one we haven't actually mentioned, but I'm going to throw in a bonus one here. Go to fontpairs.co. And there it will give you lots and lots of inspiration for font pairings. So that's having like one font for your header and one font for your body. And it gives you real inspiration of which ones work together well. And font pairings can be really, really good. They can really add some personality to your brand. And they can also be really helpful for creating that visual hierarchy on your slides. So check out fontpairs.co.
Cool. And then we also talked about Typewolf. I think we mentioned it, saying that if you found something at What the Font, then you could go to Typewolf and see what they recommended for alternatives. That's at typewolf.com. But there's one other tool that we've got to mention here, the Swiss Army knife of saving you when you've got a problem with a font, which is SlideWise by New Power. It allows you to crack open that PowerPoint file and figure out what is going on with the font bloat, with fonts not showing correctly, whatever. You can go in there and literally find where those fonts are on various different pages. You've got to pay for it, but it's definitely worth it if you're running into issues with fonts. I highly recommend downloading SlideWise.
100%. Just on SlideWise, it goes back to my point about being consistent and people focusing on your message and not things being off in your decks. And this is one tool that can really help you not just tidy it up, but really get it consistent.
Excellent, for sure. Love it. So that's been thoroughly enjoyable. I could get lost in fonts for flipping ages. Before you go, can you all leave me one final thought on fonts, typefaces, or whatever you want to call them?
My biggest takeaway would probably be for everybody to realize that fonts aren't just decoration, they're actually doing psychological work in your deck. Whether you've thought about it or not, they're a visual cue that everybody's taking in. So definitely limit any deck to 1 or 2 fonts if you need to do a nice font pairing, because every extra font that you add is doing extra work for the brain. So spending loads of energy decoding the style and what looks off and what doesn't. Take all that away and just keep it really simple. And if you wanted to go with the default, go with the default.
Yeah, and I'll add, sometimes it's better to play it safe and be sure, to use a standard font, because readability and consistency are really important when it comes to presentation. It's okay to play it safe and pick one of the standard fonts. It's probably going to save you a lot of time and effort.
I think a really helpful tip, I find that a lot with my clients, we spoke about the back end that a presentation designer does, the tech back end, and making sure that what you're working on is actually going to work when it gets to its destination. Create a font test. So, but how I do this for my clients all the time, it's just a single slide deck. You've set up the fonts in your theme, you've set up your colors, you put the colors across the bottom if you want to say to your client, these are the colors in accents 1 to 6. Can you confirm the hex refs? That's a nice to have at the bottom. But what you do is you put your headline font, you put your body copy, and all on the left-hand side. That's live text, the text that you can edit on the slide. Then you screen grab that text on the left-hand side and you put it on the right-hand side. So you've got a like-for-like comparison. Then I send it off to the client and I say, distribute this amongst at least minimum half a dozen machines, max PCs, different locations, if they've got more than one location, and say, does the left look like the right? Then we know that all the fonts have been installed by IT or whomever's responsible for putting the fonts on the machine at the destination. Also, and we've come a cropper on this in the past before as well. Can you PDF it? Is it going to work? And once those tests have been performed, you've performed those tests and they work, you know you're good to go. So that's a really, really helpful tip. And then now you can go and spend the budget or burn the budget on creating beautiful pages, knowing it's going to work elsewhere. Last thing you want to do is create a 60 slide deck and think, oh no, I've got to redo it all. So there you go.
Font test is a great idea. I love that, Andy.
Love it, Andy. That's proper gold. My one is there's supposed to be this unwritten rule about not having more than 3 fonts on something, from a graphic design rule. Emma's talked about limit it to 1 to 2 fonts. One thing you can do is just limit it to one font, but to create that hierarchy, use a different actual font, a different way. So the
Yeah.
same typeface, to try
Yep.
and clarify a little bit, but your headlines are in bold and your body copies in light or in normal or regular. And it just creates a nice parallel, but everything looks really tight and neat in there.
Yeah, I've got one client that has Arial black for the headlines, big bold headlines, and then you've got Arial regular and Arial bold, and that's enough of a hierarchy for them to get a half decent slide without all the stuff we've spoken about. Because, like as to your point, PK, kept it safe. They know it's going to go on every machine. If you style the pages correctly, you'd be surprised how much you can get out of it.
Yeah, love it.
Can I add one more point? You can get kind of different using fonts. So if you want to, you're talking about creating highlight and emphasis. Sometimes for highlight on a page, instead of doing what we typically do, which is bold the text and change the color or put a background, behind that text to call it out, think about using a fluid serif font as to like a standard font that's more like Aptos or Arial or something. That can really create a bold moment on a slide.
Yeah.
I do these decks for Nike every now and again, and they're mainly Helvetica, really big and bold and sort of like their website and their stores look. And then they've got this one called, I think it's called Trajan, which is like a super flowery English old school script that will chop in for, like, to your point, to highlight a word or a phrase or a header, and it looks gorgeous. It looks really nice.
Love that. So that's it for this episode of Next Slide, Please. Thank you so much for listening. If you want to know more about us, we're on LinkedIn, we're on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts.
Everywhere, basically.
Yes.
I'm Emma again, and you can find me at birdboxdesigns.com or on LinkedIn and also Instagram.
And I'm Mark, and you can find me at 6mileshigh.com or again on LinkedIn and Instagram. Just need to look for 6 Miles High.
And I'm PK. You can find me on LinkedIn or at pkdigital.net.
And I'm Andy Bundock. You can find me at andybundock.com or on LinkedIn and Instagram too.
Brilliant. So we'd love to hear from you. We're a friendly bunch. Anything you don't like, tell us. Anything you do like, please tell everybody else. So see you on the next episode of Next Slide, Please.